Your motorcycle won't pay the bills, Dad said, mocking me. But when my brother exposed I had a fortune at Thanksgiving dinner, they won a mansion plus $250,000 from me. I, 32 male, grew up as a certified family disappointment. My parents didn't just think I was less impressive than my brother, they made it their mission to remind me daily. While my younger brother, 30 male, Marcus, the golden child, was busy collecting academic trophies and getting straight A's, I was the guy spending every waking minute in my neighbor's garage learning how to fix motorcycles. My obsession with bikes started when I was 14. Our neighbor, let's call him Mr. J, restored vintage Harleys and let me hang around his garage after school. The dude was more of a father to me than my actual dad. He'd actually listen when I talked and teach me real skills. While Marcus was winning science fairs with whatever nerdy project my parents paid for, I was learning how to rebuild carburetors and tune engines on classic shovelheads and panheads. Mr. J would actually high-five me when I figured stuff out, while at home, my accomplishments might as well have been invisible. The classic line in our house wasn't "good job" or "I'm proud of you." It was, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" I swear to God, I heard that phrase so often I thought it was my actual name for a while. When Marcus got accepted into some fancy science program in 10th grade, my dad bought him a $2,000 gaming laptop for educational purposes, yeah right, a new desk setup, and took the family out for steak. When I rebuilt my first engine completely solo, a vintage Ironhead that even Mr. J said it was challenging, my parents couldn't even be bothered to look up from dinner. I walked in all excited like, "Hey, got that Sportster running today?" And my dad just grunted, "Keep it down." It wasn't just ignoring my interests. They actively tried to sabotage my motorcycle phase. Their words, not mine. My motorcycle magazines would mysteriously disappear. Tools I bought with my own money would vanish from the garage. Once I saved up for 3 months to buy a used repair manual collection, and my mom donated them during spring cleaning because that junk was cluttering up your room. But Marcus's bedroom looked like a Best Buy, and Barnes & Noble had explosive diarrhea all over it. Latest tech, stacks of books, special desk lighting so his precious genius brain could develop properly. Meanwhile, I got yelled at for having dirty fingernails from working on engines. The worst was whenever relatives came over. My parents would parade Marcus around like a show pony. Marcus got accepted to the governor's STEM program. Marcus won first place at regionals. Marcus is being recruited by MIT. Then some uncle or cousin would turn to me and ask what I was up to, and before I could answer, my mom would jump in with, "Oh, he's just going through a rebellious phase with these motorcycles. He'll grow out of it and get a real job eventually." Then my dad would add something supportive like, "Not everyone can be academically inclined like Marcus. We're still waiting to see what he'll do with himself." Then they'd literally change the subject back to Marcus. I wasn't even worth a conversation. By senior year, Marcus had already been accepted to 3 elite universities with full rides. My parents turned our refrigerator into a shrine for his acceptance letters, literally covered with them. Not exaggerating. I had solid grades, but I also had an actual life plan. I wanted to open a motorcycle repair shop specializing in American classics. I'd been working part-time at the local garage for 2 years, saving every dollar, studying business plans at night. My boss said I had real talent, and customers would specifically ask for me to work on their bikes. Not that any of this registered with my parents. According to them, my entire future was a joke because it didn't involve a fancy degree or sitting in an office. Every time I mentioned my shop plans, my mom would get this pained look like I just told her I was planning to become a professional dumpster diver. My dad wouldn't even acknowledge it. He'd literally pretend I hadn't spoken. The funny thing? My parents weren't even successful themselves. Dad was a middle manager at some insurance company, constantly passed over for promotions. Mom was an administrative assistant who talked about her career like she was running the place. But somehow they'd convinced themselves that Marcus was their ticket to reflected glory. He would become something big and important, and they'd get to say, "That's our son." By 18, I was basically invisible in my own home. I'd come and go, and half the time they wouldn't even notice. So when I graduated high school, I had about $12,000 saved up. Not life-changing money, but pretty damn impressive considering I was making $8.50 an hour turning wrenches at the garage. I'd been living like a monk for 2 years. No new clothes, no going out with friends, no $300 gaming consoles that Marcus seemed to get every Christmas. Just work, save, and occasionally buy parts to practice rebuilds on junker bikes I'd flip for small profits. I was basically running a mini business out of Mr. J's garage on weekends, and he was cool enough to let me keep whatever I made. I needed around $40,000 to make my shop dream happen, proper equipment, not the hand-me-down tools I was using. First month's rent on a small shop space, insurance, which is expensive of when you're 18, and some initial inventory. I'd spent months grinding through research on small business loans, SBA options, interest rates. The only issue? No credit history. I needed a co-signer. I'll never forget the night I tried to have the talk with my parents. I waited until Sunday dinner when everyone was in a decent mood. I'd even made this professional-looking binder with my entire business plan. Color-coded tabs, market analysis, competition research, projected earnings, the whole nine. Even had letters from my boss and 3 local bike guys vouching for my skills. I spent 2 weeks working on this thing, and it looked legit as hell. I slid that binder across the table and started explaining my plan. Didn't even get 30 seconds in before my dad literally snorted, then started full-on laughing. My mom flipped through a couple pages with this look on her face like she was handling used toilet paper. The message was crystal clear. My dream was a joke to them. My dad went off about how no son of his was going to waste his life as a grease monkey when he could get an education and do something that required actual intelligence. When I pointed out that they were giving Marcus $30,000 a year for college expenses despite his scholarship, my dad turned purple. Started ranting about how Marcus was investing in his future while I was playing with bikes in a fantasy world. I went to bed that night feeling lower than whale shit. The next morning, I dragged myself to the kitchen for coffee before work and overheard my parents talking excitedly about how they'd just refinanced our house. They'd pulled out $120,000 in equity, 4 times what I needed for my business, to create a college experience fund for Marcus. My dad was going on about how Marcus needed to live in the premium dorm with the right connections and would need money for the proper social clubs and study abroad programs that would set him up for life. Something snapped in me that morning. I realized I was never going to get an ounce of support from these people. I was the family afterthought, the backup kid. My entire existence was a plan B. I didn't say a word. Went to work like normal, but inside my head, gears were turning. I'd been researching different cities for months as backup plans. Austin kept popping up. Killer motorcycle scene, manageable cost of living, and business regulations that wouldn't choke a new shop to death like back home in New Jersey. When I got home, I waited until my parents left for their weekly date night. Then I packed whatever I owned, went to the bank, withdrew my entire savings, left my house key on the kitchen counter with a note. Gone to build my future since there's no place for it here. I'll be in touch when I get settled. Then drove off to Austin. My mom called 5 times that first week. Not once did she ask if I was okay, or if I had a place to sleep. Instead, I got these insane voicemails about how selfish and inconsiderate I was for abandoning the family right when they needed to focus on Marcus's college preparations. The best one was where she actually said, "Your timing is so inconsiderate. We were going to need you to drive Marcus's things to campus and help him move in. Now we'll have to hire someone or take time off work ourselves." Heaven forbid they lift a finger for their golden child when they had a perfectly good pack mule they could have used instead. My first month in Austin was rough as hell. I rented a room in this absolute dump of a house with 4 other guys for $400 a month. The bathroom had this black mold situation that probably took years off my life, and my bedroom was basically a converted pantry with space for a twin mattress and not much else. Found a job at a local repair shop. The owner, Tom, was this old-school biker who'd been wrenching since the 70s. Dude looked as if Santa Claus was in Hell's Angels. Massive white beard, arms covered in faded tattoos, and this permanent scowl that made customers nervous. But the man was a mechanical genius. Tom started me at $14 an hour, almost double what I was making back home. I took every shift I could get my hands on, regularly pulling 60-hour weeks. On my days off, I'd help people fix their bikes out of our house's garage for cheap cash jobs, building a reputation and some side money. My roommates thought I was insane working that much, but they loved the extra cash I threw in for taking up garage space. I lived on basically nothing. Ramen, eggs, and whatever fast food was on special. No cable, no streaming services, no bars or clubs. Just work, sleep, and the occasional bike meet where I'd network with local riders and hand out cards for my side gig. My parents' calls got less frequent, then stopped entirely when I refused to engage with their guilt trips. They sent exactly 1 care package, full of college brochures for schools in Austin. Got a real good laugh out of that before tossing it in the dumpster. About 3 months in, I hit a groove. Tom started giving me the more challenging repair jobs, and customers began asking for me specifically. One guy brought in this absolutely clapped-out 70s Triumph that 3 other shops had given up on. Spent a whole weekend figuring out some weird electrical gremlin in that thing, and when the owner picked it up and heard it purring like a kitten, He tipped me $200 cash on top of the repair bill. That night, sitting on my crappy mattress counting my money, I realized something. I was making it. Not thriving, not comfortable, but surviving completely on my own terms. No one was telling me my dreams were stupid. No one was making me feel like a consolation prize in my own life. For the first time in 18 years, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And that felt better than any college acceptance letter. After a year of barely sleeping and eating, I had enough saved up for a decent loan application. My credit had improved enough from paying bills on time that the bank only required a 30% down payment instead of a cosigner. I started scouting locations during my lunch breaks. Austin was booming even then, so most decent spots were way out of my price range. After weeks of searching, I found this absolute dump on the edge of town. Previous tenant was some vape shop that went under. Shocking, I know. Place had dingy yellow walls and lighting that made it look like a serial killer's basement. But it had good highway visibility, and the rent wasn't completely insane. Most importantly, it was zoned for automotive, so I could actually work on bikes there. I'll never forget signing those lease papers. 20-year-old me committing to $1,750 a month in rent alone. Add in utilities, insurance, and all the other business expenses, and I was looking at nearly $3,000 a month in overhead before I made a single dollar. Terrifying doesn't even begin to cover it. Spent 2 weeks scrubbing that place down to the concrete and slapping fresh paint on the walls. Did it all myself after work and on my days off. My roommates helped in exchange for drinks and pizza, which was basically my only fun expense that month. W Lone Star Cycles officially opened with just me, 2 lifts I bought used from a closing Harley shop in Houston, and the basic tools I'd accumulated. My entire parts inventory was whatever I could fit in one metal cabinet. That first day I sat there from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and exactly 2 people walked in, one looking for the previous vape shop, and one guy asking if I could fix his lawnmower. I did, for $40, because beggars can't be choosers. For the first 3 months, I kept working part-time at Tom's repair shop to make sure my bills got paid. That meant opening my own shop at 7 a.m., working until 2 p.m., then heading to the repair shop from 3 to 8 p.m., then often coming back to my shop to finish jobs until midnight. 7 days a week, no days off, no social life, nothing but work and occasional sleep. I slept on a cot in the back room to save on rent, showered at the gym across the street. If any health inspector had seen my living situation, they'd have shut me down on the spot. But slowly, painfully slowly, customers started coming in. At first, it was just oil changes and basic maintenance, the cheap stuff no one else wanted to do. I took every job, no matter how small. $20 tire change? Done. $15 oil swap? Let's do it. I was the bargain basement of motorcycle shops, and I was totally fine with that. Get them in the door for the cheap stuff, impress them with quality work, and hope they come back for the bigger stuff. Word started spreading among the local bike community. I was the new guy who didn't overcharge, showed up when he said he would, and could work on vintage American bikes that the bigger shops didn't want to touch. After about 6 months, I had enough steady business that I could quit the repair shop. Tom was actually cool about it. Told me he'd expected me to leave months earlier. My first real break came when this rich tech guy brought in his 60s panhead that 3 other shops had tried and failed to get running right. He'd heard about me from someone in his riding club and figured he had nothing to lose. Spent 3 days straight on that bike, barely sleeping, taking the entire engine apart and rebuilding it. When he picked it up and it started on the first kick, running smoother than it probably had in decades, he was so impressed he tipped me $1,000 on top of my bill. Told me he'd tell all his buddies. And holy shit, did he? Within 2 weeks, I had 4 more vintage bikes from his riding buddies. These weren't your average riders. These were tech executives and surgeons with money to burn on their hobby bikes. They didn't blink at my labor rates, and several mentioned they were relieved to find someone who actually knew about carbureted bikes, instead of just modern fuel-injected stuff. By the end of year 1, I hired my first mechanic, this old dude named Frank who'd worked at dealerships for 30 years before retiring. He was bored with retirement and wanted to work part-time. Perfect fit, and the customers loved him. His crusty old man stories alone were worth his salary. The real game changer came when I added custom work to our services. I'd always been into chopper builds, but never had the time or money to do them. Then, one of my tech executive clients asked if I could build him a custom bobber from scratch. Quoted him $18,000, expecting him to balk. He didn't even negotiate, just slapped down a $9,000 deposit like it was coffee money. That first custom build nearly killed me. Spent every waking hour on it for 2 months. Made about 1 million mistakes and had to redo parts several times. But when it was done, man. Gloss black with subtle red ghost flames, stripped down to the bare essentials. Perfect stance. It was a rolling piece of art. When the client came to pick it up, he was speechless. Started doing one custom build at a time alongside our repair business. Each one got better than the last. Started taking pictures of everything. Set up an Instagram account for the shop. Just bikes we were working on and completed builds. Wanted a place to showcase our work. 2 years after opening, we were pulling in around $500,000 annually with healthy profits. Hired 2 more full-time mechanics and a front desk person to handle scheduling and parts orders. Moved into a good apartment. Bought new tools, expanded our parts inventory, added a small but decent customer waiting area with coffee and Wi-Fi. The real cherry on top was finally treating myself to my dream bike, a fully restored 1969 Harley Shovelhead that came up for sale when an old collector passed away. Metallic blue with chrome for days. The same model Mr. J had been restoring when I first started hanging around his garage as a kid. Cost me $22,000 and worth every penny. All this time, my parents had no idea. We barely spoke, just a text on birthdays and holidays. They never asked about the business, and I never volunteered the information. In my mind, they'd lost the right to know about my success when they laughed me out of the room with my business plan. Their loss, not mine. But family has a way of worming back into your life, especially when they smell money. And that's where this story gets really interesting. Last Thanksgiving, I flew home for the first time in years. Total mistake. What the hell was I thinking mistake? It started with a text from Marcus of all people. Hey bro, been a long time. We're all doing Thanksgiving at the house this year. You should come. After ignoring me for years, now he suddenly wanted family time? Suspicious. But I'll admit part of me liked the idea of showing up successful after they'd all written me off. Maybe they'd see I wasn't the family failure they always thought I was. Plus, I was curious what they'd been up to all these years. Stupid curiosity. Bought nice gifts for everyone. Going home felt weird as hell. Like visiting a foreign country, where you used to live but can't remember the customs. Everything familiar but slightly off. Pulling up to my parents' house, I sat in the car for a solid 5 minutes just breathing. Same house. But I felt nothing. No nostalgia, no warm fuzzies, just this weird clinical detachment like I was observing someone else's life. When I walked in, walls were still covered in framed photos of Marcus's graduations, awards, and accomplishments. Not a single picture of me anywhere. Cool, cool, cool. Totally normal. Marcus was there with his new fiancée, Amber, Harvard MBA, working at some corporate consulting firm that paid well, but had him looking like absolute shit. Dark circles under his eyes, constantly checking his phone with this twitchy panic, popping antacids like they were Tic Tacs. But hey, he was successful by my parents' definition, so clearly living the dream. Dinner was classic Thomas Family Theater. The Marcus Show, guest starring Marcus. 2 straight hours of my parents fawning over his promotion, his fiancée's family connections, his new condo in the right neighborhood. My mom kept dropping price tags into the conversation like they were impressive data points. The HOA fees alone are $1,200 a month, but it's worth it for the prestige of the address. Then Amber mentioned she had a cousin in Austin. Just making conversation, you know. Oh, that's where my brother lives, Marcus said, suddenly remembering I existed. His tone had this weird fake casual vibe, but something in his expression made me uneasy. He owns some motorcycle shop or something. My dad, who hadn't directly spoken to me all night, nearly choked on his turkey. A shop? I thought you were just working at one. I shrugged, deliberately downplaying it. Started my own place a few years back. It's doing all right. Understatement of the century. But I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction. Marcus set down his fork with this smug little smirk that instantly transported me back to being 16 and him tattling to mom about me coming home late. All right, dude, why are you being so modest? Your Instagram has over 80,000 followers. Your shop just got featured in Cycle World as one of the top custom builders in Texas. Didn't that MMA fighter just buy one of your choppers for like $45,000? You're making hundreds of thousands. The dining room went dead silent. Like, hear a pin drop silent. I could practically see the dollar signs forming in their eyes. How do you know all that? I asked, genuinely surprised. We weren't even connected on social media. Marcus shrugged, still with that irritating smirk. I Google everyone. Occupational hazard of consulting. You're actually pretty easy to track online. Tons of articles, build features, customer reviews. Very impressive digital footprint for a grease monkey. He actually did the air quotes. 30 years old and still doing air quotes. The change in the room's atmosphere was immediate and gross. My dad, who'd barely acknowledged my existence for 7 years, suddenly transformed into proud papa, started telling Amber about how I'd always had a mechanical mind and how he'd encouraged my passion from day one. I nearly spit out my food. The audacity of this dude. You what? He laughed it off with a dismissive wave. Don't be modest, son. I always knew you'd figure it out eventually. This from a man who once told me fixing motorcycles was a career for people too stupid to get real jobs. The rest of dinner was like being in the Twilight Zone. My parents kept peppering me with questions about the business, but not normal questions like, are you happy? Or, do you enjoy the work? No, it was all, what's your annual revenue? And how many employees do you have now? And what's the property value in your area? My dad even used the term EBITDA, which I'm pretty sure he'd learned from a Wall Street movie the week before. After dinner, the real agenda emerged. My dad cornered me, arm around my shoulder like we were old pals who went way back. He started going on about my impressive entrepreneurial success and how he'd always known I had it in me. Years of silence, but suddenly we're besties because my bank account has commas in it. Funny how that works. My mom came with her iPad, showing me photos of houses she was considering purchasing. One was a lakefront property with a boat dock that looked like something from a vacation brochure. This one needs about $100,000 in updates, she said super casually, like she was discussing the price of potatoes. Nothing for someone successful like you. We could have family gatherings there in the summer. Wouldn't that be nice after all these years apart? I just nodded and made non-committal noises, watching this whole charade play out. The surreal part was, they seemed to genuinely believe I was buying it, like we had some alternate history, where they'd been supportive, loving parents the whole time. Then over dessert, my dad cleared his throat with this rehearsed speech energy. You know, your mother and I have been doing some financial planning. Our retirement portfolios took a hit in the last market correction. And this house, well, we refinanced a few times for Marcus's education. The smart financial move would be to retire early, avoid the high tax bracket from my end-of-career earnings. He paused, making significant eye contact with me. I knew exactly where this was going, but let him finish. Maybe you could help out your family a bit? You know, give back after all we've invested in raising you? I raised an eyebrow. How much exactly are you thinking? Dad glanced at Mom like they'd practiced this, then dropped the bomb. We'd need about $250,000 to be comfortable, plus maybe setting up a small monthly stipend. College costs really drained us, and your brother's graduate loans are significant, $250,000, plus a monthly allowance. For the people who laughed in my face when I asked them to co-sign a $40,000 loan. The people who told me my career choice was embarrassing and stupid. The people who didn't have a single photo of me in their house. Well, family supports family, my mom jumped in, reaching for my hand with this fake sincerity that made my skin crawl. We supported you your whole life. I almost laughed out loud. Did you, though? I asked quietly. Marcus, ever the peacemaker when it benefited him, jumped in with his consultant voice. Come on, bro. It's not like it would hurt you. I saw your shop's expansion in that article. You're killing it while Mom and Dad are struggling. Isn't this what family's for? I just nodded and said I'd think about it. But I already knew my answer. Just wanted to enjoy the show. My mom hugged me goodbye at the door, whispering, We're so proud of you, honey. I always knew you'd make something of yourself. The crazy part? I think she actually believed it. People really do rewrite history to make themselves the heroes of their own stories. On the ride home, I kept replaying the evening in my head. The absolute 180-degree turn in how they treated me. The way I was suddenly visible after years of being the family ghost. My mom started texting before I even boarded the plane. It was so wonderful to reconnect. Dad and I are thinking about that lakefront property. When can we expect your contribution? The absolute balls on these people. I'm serious. Not even a thank you for considering or we'd be grateful if. Just straight to when they could expect my money to start rolling in. The next few messages got progressively more entitled. My dad literally texted, We've set up a special account for your family contributions. I'll email the wire instructions. Like it was already a done deal. I didn't respond to any of it. Just let them keep digging themselves deeper. By the fifth message, I blocked their numbers. My brother too, since he'd started chiming in about how selfish I was being. I figured that was it. They'd be pissed, talk shit about me to the extended family, but eventually move on once they realized they couldn't squeeze blood from this particular stone. Boy, was I wrong. About 3 weeks after blocking them, I started getting weird messages from distant relatives and old high school friends. Is everything okay at home? Heard you're having some issues with your folks. Then my cousin called. Dude, you need to check Facebook, was the first thing he said. Your parents are on a fucking crusade. I hadn't been on Facebook in months, but I logged into my dusty account, and holy shit. My parents had gone nuclear. They'd been posting daily updates about their troubled son who had stolen family money and abandoned them in their time of need. According to their posts, I had taken $50,000 in cash from my dad's home office before leaving for Texas, money that was supposedly set aside for Marcus's education. They claimed this seed money was the only reason my business succeeded, and now I was refusing to acknowledge my debt to the family. LOL, seriously now? But wait, it got worse. My mom had joined several local community groups and was telling everyone how I'd left them struggling while I flaunted my wealth online. And she'd take screenshots from my shop's Instagram, pictures of custom builds and the new location, and post them with captions like, "While we struggle to pay medical bills, our son buys new property with money he took from us." Then, there was a GoFundMe my mother had started titled, "Abandoned by Our Son. Help Us Save Our Home." It had already raised nearly $7,000 from sympathetic strangers and distant acquaintances. I really laughed at this one. How pathetic. It was fucking unbelievable. These people were actually trying to paint me as some monster, and people were buying it. The comments were full of supportive messages and outrage on their behalf. Some family friends I'd never even heard of were posting about how they always knew there was something off about me. But I wasn't going to let that slide. I was about to teach them some good lessons. I called a lawyer immediately, filed for defamation. I forwarded all the screenshots my cousin had sent me and gave him access to my financial records. We filed the suit the next day. They were actively damaging my reputation and potentially my business with these lies. Couple of customers saw my account tags and had already mentioned seeing something online about the shop owner having family issues. In a business built on trust and personal reputation, that kind of talk can be fatal. We sent them a cease letter warning them if they don't take the post down within 48 hours, there will be consequences, and addressed each false claim with counter evidence. Their response? They doubled down. My dad posted a screenshot of the cease and desist with a caption about how I was now threatening legal action against my own parents and trying to silence their pleas for help. My mom went on some local Facebook group for parents and claimed I was legally bullying them because I was ashamed of the truth coming out. My lawyer was practically giddy and said they made our case so much stronger. They were served a legal notice that their claims are false with evidence, and they've chosen to continue. That's textbook malicious defamation. We pushed forward with the suit. The consequences hit them fast and hard. A local newspaper ran a story, and suddenly my dad was losing accounting clients. Turns out people don't trust accountants accused of lying about finances. And my mom got placed on leave from her elementary school job. Their GoFundMe got frozen when people reported it, and they couldn't provide verification for their claims. Their little social media scam was crumbling around them. A week before our court date, they caved. We settled with terms heavily in my favor. They had to post public retractions, shut down their fundraiser, and pay my legal fees. Best part? They signed an agreement prohibiting them from even mentioning my name online without permission. My cousin told me they were furious about the humiliation, but whatever. Then a week later, my dad called from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. He started, "Son, this has all gotten out of hand. We're family. We shouldn't be fighting like this. Your mother and I are willing to put all this behind us if you're ready to be reasonable. I'm just wondering how you still got the nerve to call me," I repeated. "What the fuck do you want? I don't give a shit if things got out of hand. You made your own bed. Son, please, we're in a tight spot financially since this whole misunderstanding. My business is suffering. Your mother might lose her job. We didn't expect things to go this far. We are really sorry." Translation: we didn't expect to get screwed for trying to ruin your reputation. "That's not my problem," I said. "We're done. If you contact me again, I'll report you for harassment. Now deal with the consequences and UST fuck off." And with that, I hung up and blocked the number. Since that phone call last year, I never heard from them again. Meanwhile, my career? Still booming. Just opened our second location. We're now the premier custom motorcycle shop in Central Texas, with an 8-month waiting list for builds. I've got 20 employees, a restored farmhouse outside Austin, and the freedom to build the kinds of bikes I used to dream about while being told I was wasting my life. So that's my story, Reddit. Next time someone tells you that family comes first or blood is thicker than water, remember that some family ties are actually chains. Cut them if you need to. Build your own life. Success is the sweetest revenge. Edit. Thanks for all the awards and supportive comments. To answer some common questions. 1. Stop asking if I ever plan to reconcile with them. You already know the answer. 2. Yes, I dated a couple of times through these years, but nothing worth mentioning. It ended fast. 3. Stop asking me why none of you can find Lone Star Instagram. I changed all the names for obvious reasons.